There comes a moment in a deeply feeling person's life when the weight of the world grows too heavy to carry, and yet, most of that weight was never theirs to begin with. You know this weight. You've walked into rooms and sensed pain no one mentioned. You've absorbed the tremors in someone's voice and taken them home like bruises under your skin. You've felt like a vessel for emotions that don't belong to you. You've wondered if something was wrong with you, if feeling this much, this often, made you fragile. But it doesn't. It makes you rare. You are not broken. You are not cursed. You are one of the few who still feels deeply in a world that has forgotten how. You are empathic. And this gift, this radiant, piercing ability to tune into others, is also the very thing that puts you in danger. When a soul burns with light that doesn't belong to a mask or a role, when it rises from the core of a person untouched by pretense, that light becomes a beacon, not for praise but for shadow. The unconscious seeks balance, and so the more radiant your presence, the more you attract what has been lost in others. This isn't about personality types or compatibility. This isn't just about difficult relationships. This is spiritual chemistry, a dangerous alchemy of opposites. Empaths are not simply born, they are formed, often shaped in silence, in uncertainty, in childhoods that required hyper-awareness just to feel safe. Maybe it was a parent whose moods turned like storms, or a home where your peace depended on reading the room like scripture. So you became sensitive, not as a choice, but as a shield. Your nervous system learned to listen, to absorb, to protect. You survived by becoming aware of everything except yourself. But what begins as a survival skill slowly turns into identity. And identity, in the realm of the psyche, attracts its mirror. The empath draws in the one who cannot feel. The light draws the void. And so begins a haunting dance between the one who gives and the one who takes. This is not a romance. This is not destiny. This is an echo from the unconscious, a symbolic reunion of what has been split apart. You see, the narcissist is not merely someone who is self-obsessed. The true narcissist is an archetype, a symbol of the fractured self who, having buried their own pain, feeds off the vitality of others to feel alive. The empath feels everything. The narcissist, almost nothing. One dissolves in the needs of others. The other builds walls to escape their own emptiness. They don't find each other by accident. They are drawn together by a law deeper than logic, the law of balance. Where one lacks, the other overcompensates. Where one is open, the other is closed. Together, they recreate an ancient ritual of light and dark, trying to remember they were never meant to exist apart. But that ritual becomes a tragedy when only one awakens. And too often, that one is you. You, the empath, begin to believe it is your sacred duty to heal. You convince yourself that if you just love harder, give more, stay longer, they will come back to themselves. But that belief, as noble as it feels, is not love. It is possession, an unconscious agreement with something ancient and dangerous. It is the wound inside you calling out to heal itself through someone else. And that wound wears the mask of the healer. There is nothing wrong with your light. The danger lies in thinking it's your job to save people from their darkness. The narcissist doesn't choose to exploit you consciously. They are not always the villain in their own mind. But deep down, they seek what they have disowned. And you become the mirror they cannot bear to break. A reflection of what they've lost and what you never had to give in the first place. Your empathy becomes the balm that numbs them, the illusion that they're whole again. For a while, in your presence, they forget their emptiness. But it doesn't last. Like a mirror held too long before a vampire, your light becomes unbearable to them, not because of what you do, but because of what you reflect. And that reflection, pure and unfiltered, eventually breeds resentment. They will hate what they cannot become, and in that hatred you will feel yourself fading. Not in flesh, but in essence. You begin to compromise. Bit by bit, you twist yourself to keep the peace, to preserve what feels like connection. But each silenced truth, each swallowed need, is a thread torn from the fabric of who you are. You start dreaming in symbols, of drowning, of endless hallways, of locked rooms. These aren't just nightmares. They are your soul's rebellion, a cry from the deep begging you to wake up, to see that what you call love may be a slow erasure of the self. That your loyalty, unwavering and sacrificial, might not be virtue but memory, the memory of old wounds repeating in disguise. But this pain is not here to destroy you. It's here to open you. The agony of awakening is a birth, not a death. And walking away from a bond that consumes you is not abandonment. It is resurrection. To break free is to reclaim your light, not as a lifeline for others, but as a compass for yourself. Because your light was never meant to be fuel for another's escape. It was meant to guide you home. Empathy without boundaries is not healing. It is self-destruction. Love without discernment is not noble. It is codependency. And trying to heal others before healing yourself is not spiritual strength. It is surrender to a pattern that keeps you small. The way forward isn't to shut your heart or dim your flame. It's to see clearly, to turn inward, to meet the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, the parts that long to be needed, the ones terrified of being left, the ones that will endure anything to avoid feeling alone. That is your hidden shadow. And when you meet that shadow with honesty, not shame, you begin to see the whole picture. For just as the narcissist consumes, the unaware empath offers themselves to be consumed. Not out of love, but out of a deep, unconscious belief that suffering earns worth, that disappearing ensures closeness. But this is not grace. It is self-abandonment in disguise. In that dark mirror, you must begin to ask, who gains when I silence my truth? Who thrives when I shrink myself? What part of me believes I must be in pain to be seen? These questions are sacred, but they require tenderness. You cannot force the answers. You must hold them slowly, gently, like ancient keys unlocking something buried long ago. Behind that door is your freedom and your power, a power not to rescue, not to fix, but to remain yourself in the presence of anyone, to see clearly without merging, to love without losing, to feel without dissolving. Understand this. The unconscious is not your enemy, but it does not care for your safety. It seeks integration. It seeks wholeness, no matter the cost. So if you walk through the world unaware of your light, you will be targeted by the shadows of those who do not know their own. They will reach for you, not to know you, but to feed on what they lack. And if you are still trying to earn love through endurance, you will let them. This is the ancient drama, the empath born to sense, yet trapped in the illusion that they must bleed to matter, that they must lose themselves to save others. And in that illusion, many fall. The line between calling and compulsion blurs, and what once felt sacred becomes a cycle of depletion. If certain people leave you drained, anxious, or fragmented, this is not a fault in your wiring. This is wisdom. This is your soul telling you that something is wrong, not with you, but with what you've been taught to tolerate. It is your soul that cries out, louder than any voice you've silenced. The body, ever honest, holds what your mind refuses to admit. Every knot in your stomach, every sudden fatigue, every invisible ache is a message. It speaks what your voice could not. Empaths, in their longing to make sense of chaos, often try to explain away the damage. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. But this isn't sensitivity. This is saturation. This is what happens when you are submerged in someone else's emotional storm and taught to call it love. The most dangerous thing you can do as an empath is believe it's your job to save someone else, especially when that someone carries the archetype of the devourer, the one who takes without limit and calls it need. They do not transform because you stay. They transform, if ever, when the mirror of your presence is no longer there, when the performance of connection no longer draws the applause of your attention. They may only change when you walk away, and even then, only if their soul is ready. But for the empath, that truth feels like betrayal, because somewhere in your early years, you were taught that love is earned through sacrifice, that safety comes from being good, quiet, useful. You became intuitive not by choice, but by survival. You learned to read moods like maps, to soothe adult tempers before they flared, to predict danger before it had a name. You became a master of peacekeeping, not because it was noble, but because it was necessary. And over time, what was once protection became obsession, an addiction to fixing, to making things okay so you could feel okay. But the child who did what they had to do to survive is not to blame. Still, the adult must awaken. The narcissist doesn't just reflect what you lack. They expose the part of you that still believes your worth depends on your utility, that unless you are giving, helping, healing, you are nothing. And that belief, that's the prison. And until you break it apart piece by piece, you'll keep drawing in the starving. Those who take without cruelty, but with desperation. They will sip from your soul while thanking you for your warmth, because you never asked who would protect your fire. You open the gates without once checking, what am I guarding, and who guards me? You must unlearn the love that bends until it snaps. You must discover a different kind of love, one with form, with structure. A love that says, I will not abandon myself to keep you close. That love is not a weapon, nor is it a shield. It is a home, and it is that kind of love that heals. Not just others, but you. Here lies the paradox. Empaths crave being loved for who they are. But in pursuit of that love, they hide. They twist themselves into what others need. They soften, edit, and absorb until one day they can't recognize their own reflection. That is the deep wound. And it is also the call to return. Because if you don't come home to yourself, others will continue to take. Not with malice, but because you left the door open. Life has a way of setting the boundaries we won't. It will show up as burnout, as collapse, as heartbreak, as a final deafening silence. And in that silence, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Love does not require your suffering. And if it does, it's not love. This isn't just about you. This is ancestral. You carry the ache of generations, of those who were never seen, never chosen, never heard. Your empathy is a sacred inheritance, but your task is not to carry the pain forward, it's to transform it. And that transformation begins the moment you say, no more. No more vanishing to be accepted. No more mistaking chaos for connection. No more romanticizing wounds as soul ties. No more giving yourself away in the name of peace. The world doesn't need more exhausted healers. It needs whole ones. Healers who have faced their own shadows and chosen themselves. Not out of selfishness, but truth. Your light was never meant to be burned out for others. It was meant to lead you back to yourself. It means you become sovereign. The world needs you whole. Not half-lit, not bleeding quietly behind a smile. It needs the ones who no longer apologize for the fire in their hearts. The ones who have felt every wound and still choose to protect their light, not by hiding it, but by wielding it with intention. Discernment is your sword. It is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the quiet, radical act of hearing your inner no and honoring it before it becomes a scream. It's pausing at the threshold of obligation and asking, is this love or is this a performance? Is this connection or is it extraction? You were never too much. You were simply overflowing into hands that could not carry you. That isn't shameful. That isn't failure. It's a pattern. And patterns, once seen, are not cages. They are keys. That moment, the one where you see clearly, where you feel your worth rise like a tidal wave you forgot you could summon, that is the moment your empathy transforms. No longer a sentence, no longer a soft trap you mistake for virtue. It becomes your strength, your guide, your gift. You are not in danger because people are evil. You are in danger because wounds look for comfort, and comfort is your currency. But when the healer forgets they too must heal, they become the offering. The soul cries out for equilibrium. And for the empath, that balance begins in limits, in the brave decision to define where you end and where someone else begins. That is not rejection. That is recognition. That is remembering that love is not measured by how deep you bleed, but by how true you stay to your center. This is the beginning of individuation, the sacred return to self. And every empath stands before it one day, trembling with the old fear. What if choosing myself makes me selfish? But that voice isn't truth, it's an echo, a ghost from your past, whispering that your needs are dangerous, your voice too loud, your boundaries too rigid. But ask yourself, how much longer will you betray your own clarity for the comfort of others? How many more nights will you lay awake trying to soothe storms that aren't yours? How much of your life have you spent solving sorrow that never belonged in your hands? Your heart is not broken. It's just been facing outward too long. Turn it inward. Let it become vision, not just sensitivity, but sight. The kind that tells you exactly what is yours and what is not. The kind that doesn't need proof to trust its pulse. When you allow your own energy to speak, it will lead you. It will say, this is yours and this is not. Walk away. Speak up. Sit still. Breathe. And in that stillness, your power will return. When an empath awakens, everything changes. They stop apologizing for being whole. They stop shrinking to fit into places they've outgrown. They stop explaining their no to people who never respected their yes. They stop showing up to be consumed and start standing to be seen. They don't just shine, they blaze. Not to light the way for others' darkness, but to reclaim their own path. They no longer wait for invitations. They build altars where they were once asked to kneel. They stop playing small in the hopes someone else will feel bigger. And that right there is what the world fears most. The empath who remembers. Because once you do, you cannot be manipulated. You no longer mistake emotional chaos for connection. You no longer equate caretaking with love. You stop handing over your life force to those who only knew how to take. You begin to ask the question that burns through illusion. Does this relationship honor who I'm becoming? That question is not a rejection, it's a revelation, a threshold, and not everyone will pass through it with you. That's okay. You don't need to become cold. You don't need to stop feeling. You only need to start choosing, with clarity, with courage, with your heart facing inward and your soul wide awake. It means you become clear. And clarity, true clarity, is love stripped of illusion. It is love's fiercest, most unshakable expression. Because clarity will not let you bleed in the name of compassion. It will not let you hand over your soul just because someone asked nicely. Not everyone who reaches for your light is meant to stand in it. Some will show up with beautiful scars and mesmerizing stories, only to take more than they give. Some will cry in your arms while quietly undermining you. Others will love you, but only the version of you that stays small enough not to challenge their comfort, their complacency, their control. Your light is sacred, but it is not charity. You are not a rescue mission. Your soul is not a payment. Even the most divine among us practice discernment. Even saints turned away. Even Christ knew when to rest. So if you feel drawn to someone's gravity, ask yourself, is this resonance or is it repetition? Is this the voice of intuition or the echo of a wound still hungry to be chosen? Not every pull is divine. Sometimes it's trauma dressed as destiny. Sometimes it's the ache of the child inside you whispering, maybe this time I'll be enough to stay. But you don't have to wait to be chosen anymore. You can choose you. You can become the parent your younger self never had. The one who says with unwavering love, I will not abandon you again. Not even for love. Because the real warning for the empath isn't that others are dangerous. It's that your own unhealed need to be needed can turn you into a sacrificial flame. When you confuse your worth with your usefulness, when you believe love must cost your life force, you repeat the oldest wound of all. Self-erasure in the name of connection. That path doesn't free you, it empties you, it leaves you hollow. But when you see it, when you look that pattern in the eye and say, I see you now, everything changes. That is the moment the pen returns to your hand. And you begin to write a new chapter, one where you are not a sponge, absorbing the chaos of the world, but a vessel, clear, grounded, lit from within. Your light no longer flickers from exhaustion. It becomes a steady flame with direction, a purpose. And that purpose is not to save others from their pain. It is to show that transformation is possible, not through depletion, but through self-possession. Empath, your gift is not your suffering. Your gift is your sight, the ability to feel what others miss, to name the unspoken, to sense the truth beneath the surface. But that gift must be protected, not hidden, but honored, guarded like sacred fire. Let your yes be holy. Let your no be a shield. Let your energy be a sanctuary, not a buffet. You are not here to be consumed. You are not the answer to everyone's ache. You are not a remedy. You are not a savior. You are a soul, sovereign, radiant, seen. And when you truly believe that, the world stops feeding on you. It starts recognizing you. Because something shifts. The soul still cries for balance, yes. And for the empath, that balance begins with boundaries that are not apologies, but declarations. Love is no longer measured by endurance. It is measured by honesty. How much of your truth you can carry without setting it down for someone else's comfort. This is individuation, not merging, not blending, not losing yourself in others, but coming home. Every empath will face that edge, that sacred moment where choosing themselves feels like betrayal. But that fear isn't wisdom. It isn't your higher self. It's a remnant. The voice of old programming that said your feelings were too much, your needs were inconvenient, your truth was a threat. But now you know better. Now you know that real love doesn't require your disappearance. Now you know you're allowed to be whole. How long will you keep paying the price of silence? How many times will you hand over your intuition like a peace offering just because someone else looks hurt? How many nights will you spend unraveling emotions that were never yours to carry? You were taught, somewhere early, somewhere deep, that your needs were too loud, your feelings too heavy, your truth too expensive. But that voice was wrong. And now it's time to ask yourself, who taught you to betray your own knowing just to be loved? The empath's heart is a compass, but only when you stop pointing it outward in search of safety and finally let it lead you home. If all your sensitivity is spent scanning the room, reading people, soothing storms, then you become an antenna for pain, for confusion, for manipulation dressed as intimacy. But when that same sensitivity turns inward, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes vision. Vision into what's real, into what belongs to you and what never did, into the shape of your soul before you bent it to be accepted. And do you know what happens when an empath awakens? They stop apologizing for their boundaries. They stop shrinking to make others more comfortable. They stop explaining their needs to people who only ever heard them as threats. They stop lighting themselves on fire to keep others warm. They rise, not as gentle lamps flickering in the corner, but as torches, steady, fierce, rooted. They stop begging for space at tables where they were only ever served starvation. They build altars instead. Not out of sacrifice, but out of truth, out of self-recognition. That is what the world fears. Not your pain, your remembrance. Because when you remember who you are no longer easy to manipulate. You stop offering your energy to those who feed off it, but never give back. You stop confusing chaos for chemistry, and you begin asking the question that changes everything. Does this relationship honor who I am becoming? That question is not cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity is love's most radical expression. It says, I will not dilute myself to keep someone else comfortable. I will not stay in rooms that require me to go quiet to be loved. I will not carry wounds that are not mine just to feel worthy. Because not everyone who reaches for your light deserves to hold it. Some will come wrapped in pain that draws you in. Some will cry in your arms while quietly dismantling your spirit. Others will love you truly, but only the version of you that doesn't disturb their comfort, their stagnation. Your light may be divine, but it is not an offering to every outstretched hand. Even Christ had discernment. Even saints knew when to rest. You must know when to walk away. So when you feel pulled, ask, is this sacred resonance or familiar repetition? Is this intuition or is it your inner child aching to be chosen just one more time? That ache can be loud, but you must choose yourself first. You must become the parent your wounded heart never had, the one who says, no, I will not abandon you. Not for anyone, not even for love. The final danger is not what others might do to you. It's what you do to yourself in the name of being needed. It's your belief that your value is measured in how much of yourself you give away. That ancient belief that love means depletion. But that story doesn't end in liberation. It ends in burnout, in emptiness, in forgetting who you are. But when you see the pattern, and I mean really see it, you hold power again. When you look at it and say, I know this now, you reclaim the pen, you write something new, something honest, A chapter where you are no longer a sponge for the world's wounds, but a vessel for clarity, where your light doesn't flicker from fatigue, but burns with purpose. And that purpose is not to fix, to save, or to absorb. It is to embody the living proof that wholeness exists, not through sacrifice, through transformation. Empath, your gift is not your suffering. It never was. Your gift is your sight, the rare, raw ability to feel what others cannot see. But that gift must be protected, guarded, revered. Let your yes be sacred. Let your no be sealed with love and conviction. Let your presence be a sanctuary, not a service station. You are not the solution to everyone's ache. You are not a cure. You are not a savior. You are a soul, whole, sovereign, seen. And when you finally believe that, the world doesn't take from you anymore. It begins to meet you, respect you, rise to your level, because you've remembered, and that changes everything. The air around you changes, not because others have transformed, but because you have. You are no longer broadcasting the frequency of self-sacrifice. You're not offering yourself up on the altar of someone else's emptiness. You are rooted. You are centered. You no longer ask, what do they need from me? But what does my soul need to stay intact? And that shift, it's magnetic. It draws in those who are aligned and repels those who came only to take. When you embody your own worth, there's a quiet power in you that doesn't need to convince anyone. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who were never planning to honor them. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace. Your energy speaks louder than any justification ever could. Because when you finally believe you are worthy, not for what you give, not for how well you carry others, but simply because you are, you move differently. You speak from the center, not from fear. You stop leaking yourself into spaces that only echo your wounds. You become the guardian of your own light. And the world, yes, even the harsh, chaotic, demanding world, begins to adjust. Not because it suddenly becomes kind, but because it recognizes you now. It sees the line you've drawn, the sacred edge you've claimed, the standard you've raised, not out of pride, but out of reverence for your own soul. This is what happens when the empath returns to themselves. Not cold, not closed, just whole. And in that wholeness, they no longer need to be chosen. They choose. And that choice changes everything.